There is something that happens when a woman has lived long enough to stop pretending, when she has survived enough to stop fearing, when she has loved enough and lost enough to finally understand what she actually wants and what she absolutely will not accept. Something shifts in her, something settles, and something about that settled, unshakable quality makes a very specific type of man deeply, quietly, nervously uncomfortable. Not all men, not the ones who are whole within themselves, not the ones who have done their own inner work and arrived at a place of genuine confidence. Those men, the real ones, the grounded ones, they don't feel nervous around a woman like you. They feel drawn to you. They feel relieved by you. They feel like they can finally exhale. But there is another kind of man. The kind who walks around presenting strength to the world, but is actually operating from a very fragile internal script. The kind who needs to feel superior to feel stable. The kind who uses charm like a tool and expects compliance like a reward. That man, the one the world sometimes mistakes for strong, he looks at a woman over 60 who has fully stepped into herself, and something in him tightens. He cannot name it. He probably won't admit it. But it is there. And today, we are going to name it for him, because naming it is exactly what protects you. This video is for the women who have wondered why certain men seem almost irritated by their calm, why some men respond to their wisdom with dismissiveness rather than appreciation, why a man who seemed initially attracted to them starts subtly, or not so subtly, trying to diminish them once he realizes just how whole she actually is. If you have ever felt that strange friction and wondered what was really going on beneath it, this video is going to give you answers. We are going to walk through 5 specific qualities that women over 60 carry. Qualities that are genuinely powerful, genuinely magnetic, and genuinely beautiful. That make men who are secretly insecure feel quietly, deeply nervous. Not because these qualities are threatening in any harmful way, but because to a man whose sense of self depends on a woman needing him, or deferring to him, or being uncertain enough to be managed. A woman who has none of those vulnerabilities is almost impossible to be around without feeling exposed. You stay with me through this entire video because by the end, you will not just understand why this dynamic exists, you will understand exactly what it reveals about the men who experience it and what it confirms about you. Before we dive in, if you are new to this channel, welcome. The Heart Decoded is a space built specifically for women over 60 who are done shrinking, done settling, and done being made to feel like their age diminishes their value. Every video here is grounded in psychology, lived truth, and deep respect for the wisdom that comes with the kind of life you have actually lived. If that resonates with you, please take a moment right now to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video. This community is growing every single week, and the conversations happening here are genuinely changing lives. Now let us get into it. Let us start by setting something important as a foundation before we get to the 5 things, because this conversation will land differently and more usefully if we are honest about what kind of man we are actually talking about. When most people hear the phrase strong man, they picture someone decisive, physically capable, perhaps successful in his career, someone who takes up space in a room. And in the most surface-level reading, that image can look like genuine strength. But genuine strength in a man, the kind that actually comes from the inside, is not rattled by a woman's wholeness. A man who is truly secure does not need you to be insecure. A man who is truly confident does not need you to be confused. A man who genuinely loves does not need you to be dependent in order to feel valuable. The men we are talking about today are the ones who present that outer image of strength, but are actually operating from a deep, often unconscious fear of inadequacy. Psychologists sometimes describe this as fragile masculinity, a sense of identity that requires constant external validation and that crumbles when met with someone who cannot be easily managed, impressed, or destabilized. These men are not always obvious. They can be charming. They can be generous in certain moments. They can say all the right things in the beginning. But over time, certain things about a woman over 60 begin to make them visibly uncomfortable. And that discomfort, if you know how to read it, tells you everything you need to know about whether this man is actually equipped to be in your life. Here is the other thing to understand. You are not doing anything wrong when you trigger that discomfort. You are not being too much or too intimidating or too independent. You are simply being yourself, the fully developed, experience-tempered, no longer willing to perform version of yourself. And that self simply does not leave room for a fragile man to maintain his illusions. And that is not a problem you need to solve. Okay, let us get into the 5 things. The first thing about you that makes certain men quietly nervous is your relationship with the truth. Women over 60 who have done any real amount of self-reflection, and most of you watching this have done a tremendous amount, tend to have a very different relationship with honesty than younger women often do. Not because younger women are dishonest, but because a woman who has lived through enough has usually burned through her capacity for comfortable illusions. She has seen what happens when you tell yourself stories to avoid difficult conversations. She has watched relationships deteriorate because someone refused to face what was plainly in front of them. She has paid the price for staying in situations that she knew in her body, in her bones, in the quiet, early morning hours were not right, but stayed anyway because the truth was inconvenient or frightening or would require change. After 60, many women simply stop doing that, not because they have become harsh or brutal in their honesty, but because they have learned that the short-term discomfort of naming something clearly is vastly preferable to the long-term cost of pretending. They call things what they are. They say what they mean. They do not make themselves smaller in conversation to protect a man's ego. They do not soften every observation until it has lost its shape. They do not lie about what they want or what they feel in order to be more palatable. And for a man who depends on women managing his comfort for him, a man who has been conditioned to expect that women around him will soften the edges of reality to protect his ego. This kind of clear, grounded truth-telling is profoundly unsettling. Think about what it means when a woman will not pretend, when she will not nod along with something she disagrees with just to keep the peace, when she gently but clearly says, "Actually, I see that differently," or "That is not something I am willing to do," or "I need you to understand that this did not feel good to me." A man who is genuinely secure hears those things and feels respected. He understands that he is in the presence of someone who will be honest with him, and he values that even when it is uncomfortable. But a man who is secretly fragile, he hears those same words as a kind of attack, as a challenge to his authority, as an indication that this woman cannot be controlled. And if she cannot be controlled, she represents a threat to the version of himself he has been so carefully maintaining. There is also a deeper dimension to this. The women over 60 who have a clean relationship with truth tend to be very good at seeing through performance. They have seen enough performance in relationships, in workplaces, in social settings to recognize it quickly. They know the difference between someone being real and someone playing a role. And when a man who is performing, who is presenting a polished version of himself designed to impress or charm, encounters a woman who can see right through the performance without being unkind about it, something happens. He feels seen, not in the warm way, in the exposed way, in the way that makes him feel like his carefully constructed presentation is not working, and that is terrifying to a man who depends on his presentation to feel safe. Your honesty is not the problem. Your honesty is a feature, not a flaw. It is one of the clearest signals of genuine maturity and emotional health. The men who are made nervous by it are precisely the men you do not want performing in your life. The second thing about you that makes certain men quietly nervous is that you no longer need to be rescued. This one runs very deep, and it is worth spending real time on because it touches something that lives at the core of many men's sense of identity, particularly men of a certain generation who were raised to understand their value through their usefulness, through providing, through solving, through being needed. There is nothing inherently wrong with that impulse. The desire to protect, to provide, to be useful. Those are not bad instincts. But when a man's entire sense of self-worth is tied to a woman needing him, when he can only feel significant in a relationship if the woman he is with requires something from him that she cannot supply for herself, then a woman who is genuinely self-sufficient becomes, in a strange and painful way, a direct threat to his sense of purpose. Women over 60 who have been building their lives, who have survived loss, raised families, navigated careers, managed finances, repaired broken hearts, rebuilt after divorce or widowhood, created friendships and communities and routines that sustain them. These women do not need to be rescued. They have already rescued themselves, multiple times in ways most people will never fully know. They have a roof over their head, not because a man provided it, but because they built their life with intention and care. They have an inner life that sustains them, not because someone else gave it to them, but because they cultivated it through years of hard, honest, often lonely inner work. When a man like the one we are describing meets a woman like that, the experience can feel disorienting to him, because where does he fit? What is his role? If she does not need rescuing, if she does not need managing, if she is not waiting anxiously by the phone or looking to him to define her worth, what exactly can he offer? And if he cannot find a way to make himself essential, he begins to feel invisible, or worse, irrelevant. Here is what this often looks like in practice. He will subtly try to find areas where you need help. He will make small suggestions about how you could be doing things better. He will offer unsolicited advice. He will point out problems you have not asked him to solve. And when you respond with calm confidence, when you say, "Actually, I have that handled, thank you," he does not feel proud of you. He feels deflated because the transaction he was hoping for, the dynamic where you need and he provides, never gets completed. Some men will escalate this. They will begin to quietly undermine your confidence in certain areas, not consciously or with malicious intent necessarily, but because some part of them is hoping that if they can introduce a little uncertainty, a little doubt, you might start to lean on them more. This is not love. This is a man who is uncomfortable with your wholeness and is trying, unconsciously perhaps, but still, to create a version of you that needs him. You do not have to shrink yourself to make a man feel useful. A relationship built on a woman pretending to need saving is not a partnership. It is a performance that protects a fragile ego at the cost of a woman's actual life. You are allowed to be whole. You are allowed to have built something real. You are allowed to want a companion rather than a savior, because that is what a grown person wants. And the right man, the actually strong man, will find your self-sufficiency not threatening but deeply attractive, because it means that if he is in your life, he is there because you chose him, not because you had no other options. Being chosen freely by a woman who could clearly choose otherwise, that is a profound gift. Only a man who is secure enough to receive it can recognize it for what it is. The third thing about you that makes certain men quietly nervous is your emotional clarity. This is closely related to your relationship with truth, but it is distinct in an important way. Emotional clarity is not just about knowing what you think, it is about knowing what you feel, being able to identify it, name it, and articulate it without shame or apology or excessive explanation. It is the ability to say, "I felt dismissed when that happened," or "I am not comfortable with the direction this conversation is taking," or "something about this does not feel right to me, and I am choosing to trust that feeling." Most women do not arrive at this clarity easily or quickly. So it is the product of years, sometimes decades, of learning to listen to yourself after a lifetime of being encouraged to listen to everyone else. Many women in their 60s grew up in a cultural moment that taught them to prioritize other people's emotional comfort over their own, to manage how others felt while their own feelings went unexamined, to smooth things over, keep the peace, be the bigger person, not make a fuss. And then life happened. Relationships, heartbreaks, losses, recoveries. And at some point, in the middle of all of that, they started listening to themselves. Really listening. And they developed an emotional vocabulary and a self-awareness that is genuinely rare. For a man who is emotionally underdeveloped, and there are many, this is not an insult. It is a statistical reality given the way men of certain generations were socialized. This level of emotional clarity in a woman is profoundly confronting, because when you can name what you are feeling clearly and without drama, you close the door on several manipulation tactics that emotionally underdeveloped people, consciously or not, tend to rely on. When a woman is emotionally confused, she can be persuaded that she misunderstood, that she is being too sensitive, that she is misremembering what happened, that she is overreacting, and because she is uncertain, she second-guesses herself, and that second-guessing creates space for someone else to rewrite the story. But when a woman has emotional clarity, those tactics do not work. When she says, "I felt disrespected by that comment," and she says it calmly and clearly, without shrieking or crying or falling apart, there is no way to dismiss it. There is no way to say she is too emotional because she is not being dramatic. She is just clear. She knows what happened. She knows what she felt. And she is naming it. That level of clarity, that quiet confidence in her own emotional experience, is almost impenetrable to someone who relies on confusion to maintain control. And so a certain type of man will find himself feeling deeply nervous around it. He might try to turn it into a criticism. She is too analytical. She is emotionally cold. She overthinks everything. These are attempts to reframe her clarity as a flaw because her clarity makes him feel exposed. But here is what that nervous response actually reveals. If a man becomes visibly uncomfortable when you know what you feel and say it calmly, it means he was depending on you not knowing. He was depending on you being uncertain enough to be redirected. He was depending on your confusion to maintain his sense of control, and your emotional clarity took that away from him without you even trying. This is not something you should feel bad about. Your emotional intelligence is the result of a lifetime of paying attention to yourself and others. It is a gift to yourself and to any relationship that is actually built on mutual respect and genuine communication. Do not let anyone convince you that knowing yourself too well is a character flaw. The fourth thing about you that makes certain men quietly nervous is that you have standards that do not bend. And not just any standards. Standards that come from a place of deep self-knowledge, rather than from a list of requirements you read somewhere or a set of rules someone told you to follow. Standards that are grounded in lived experience, in knowing what genuinely nourishes you and what genuinely drains you, in having tried certain things and found them lacking, in having compromised before and having seen exactly what compromise costs. Women over 60 who have fully stepped into themselves know what they want. Not in a demanding, rigid, entitled way, but in a quiet, settled, unbothered way that is somehow even more powerful. They know what kind of communication feels healthy to them. They know what behaviors they will not accept. They know the difference between a man who is genuinely kind and a man who is performing kindness to get something. They know when they are being handled and when they are being respected. They know what a good morning feels like, and they know what a good relationship feels like, and they are not willing to pretend that something mediocre is the former just to avoid being alone. These standards, this settled sense of what's acceptable and what is not, are absolutely maddening to a man who is used to being able to negotiate them down, because a great deal of what passes for romantic pursuit in some men's playbooks is actually about finding the edges of a woman's boundaries and pushing on them until she softens, until she says, well, I guess that is okay, until she accepts something she had previously said she would not accept because the alternative feels lonelier than the compromise. A woman with unshakable standards removes that entire strategy from the table. When she says, I need honesty in a relationship, she is not opening a negotiation. When she says, I am not interested in a situationship or something undefined, she is not being dramatic. When she says, I expect to be treated with consistent respect, she is not presenting a maximum position from which she will later retreat. She means it, and she will follow through. She will walk away from something that does not meet those standards. Not dramatically, not with anger, but with quiet, sorrowful clarity. And she will be okay when she does. That is terrifying to a man who banks on women not meaning what they say, who counts on the fear of loneliness to eventually override a woman's stated requirements, who has navigated his way through relationships by charming women out of their standards just long enough to get what he wanted, and then wondered why the relationship deteriorated. But your standards are also something else. They are a form of profound self-respect. They are you saying loudly, without even raising your voice, that you understand your own worth, that you have done the work to know what you need, that you believe you deserve the things you are asking for. And that kind of self-respect, that unwillingness to negotiate your basic needs down to nothing, is not something a fragile man can survive for long, because it reflects back to him exactly how little self-respect he is walking around with, and that is the mirror he cannot bear to look into. The right man, however, the man who has also done some work, who has also arrived at a place of knowing himself and his own value, he will recognize your standards not as walls, but as architecture, as evidence that you have designed your life with intention, as something to be respected and met, not dismantled. And meeting them will not feel like a burden to him. It will feel like being called up to the best version of himself. The fifth thing about you that makes certain men quietly nervous is that you are no longer afraid of being alone. This might be the most quietly radical thing about a woman over 60 who has done her inner work. She has made peace with solitude, not settled for it, not resigned herself to it, actually made peace with it, found the beauty in it, the freedom in it, the deep, sustaining richness of a life that is genuinely her own. This is not the same as not wanting connection. Women like you want love, want companionship, want warmth and laughter, and someone to share the beautiful and difficult parts of life with. That desire is real, and it is beautiful, and there is nothing wrong with it. But that desire is not the same as fear, and for a great portion of your life, for most women's lives, the desire for love was tangled up with a fear of what life would look like without it. The fear of being alone was so powerful that it often overrode good judgment, silenced inner knowing, and kept women in situations that did not deserve them. At some point, for many women over 60, something changed. Maybe it was a period of necessary solitude after a relationship ended. Maybe it was a period of simply being present with their own life and discovering, to their own surprise, that it was enough, more than enough, that they woke up in the morning in their own space and felt something they had not expected to feel: peace, pleasure, a kind of settled private joy, that they went to dinner alone or on a trip alone or spent a weekend with themselves and found that they were, in fact, quite good company, that their own mind was interesting to them, that their own heart was generous to them, that a quiet evening without anyone needing anything from them was not something to be endured, but something to be savored. Once a woman discovers that she is genuinely okay on her own, once she knows it in her body, not just tells herself it is true, her entire relationship with romantic pursuit changes. She no longer negotiates from a place of fear. She no longer accepts poor treatment because the alternative feels worse. She no longer rushes towards certainty because uncertainty feels unbearable. She waits. She observes. She gives things time to reveal themselves. She walks away from things that are not right without it destroying her, because she knows that whatever comes next, even if what comes next is more solitude, she is going to be okay. That absence of desperation is, for a man who is accustomed to a woman's loneliness being his leverage, absolutely paralyzing, because here is how it works for the kind of man we are discussing. He has learned, perhaps through many relationships, that a woman's fear of being alone is something that works in his favor. It is the thing that keeps her coming back after she has said she would not. It is the thing that makes her tolerate more than she should. It is the thing that eventually softens her hard lines into suggestions that can be ignored. Her loneliness is his insurance policy. And when he encounters a woman who does not have that fear, who is, in some fundamental way, at ease with herself and her life, regardless of whether he stays or goes, that insurance policy evaporates. He has no leverage. He cannot use her loneliness against her because she has moved beyond it. He cannot keep her with the threat of loss because she has already made friends with loss in a way that has freed her from it. This does not mean she does not care. It does not mean she is cold or closed or indifferent to love. It means she loves from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. She offers herself to a relationship because she genuinely wants to, not because she is afraid of the alternative. And that kind of loving, generous, and clear-eyed and free of desperation is something that a genuinely secure man will receive as a profound blessing. But to a man who needs fear to maintain control, to a man who has structured his romantic life around being the solution to a woman's loneliness, your peace is not a comfort. It is a revelation he cannot make sense of. And the nervous energy that creates in him, the subtle discomfort, the need to test your boundaries, the quiet undermining, the attempts to introduce instability into your calm, all of that is the response of a man whose playbook has stopped working and who does not have a better one. Now, I want to talk about something that all 5 of these qualities have in common, because there is a thread running through each of them that I do not want you to miss. Each of these qualities, your honesty, your self-sufficiency, your emotional clarity, your standards, and your peace with solitude, each of them is an expression of the same underlying thing. They are all the result of you having chosen yourself, probably over and over and over again, in ways large and small, across decades of a life fully lived. Choosing yourself is not a selfish act. It is not a hardening of the heart. It is not a refusal of love. It is actually the deepest possible form of self-respect and self-respect. Real self-respect. Say the kind that runs all the way down to the bedrock of who you are, is not something that can be argued or flattered or manipulated away. And that is precisely why it makes a certain kind of man nervous. because everything he has learned about getting what he wants depends, in some way, on a woman not having it. I want to be very clear about something, because it would be easy to walk away from this conversation feeling as though all men are threatened by strong women, and that is not what I am saying. It is not true, and it would be a disservice to both the conversation and to you to leave you with that impression. There are men in the world, genuinely emotionally mature, self-aware, grounded men, who are not threatened by a woman's wholeness, who do not need her to be smaller to feel bigger themselves, who have done enough of their own inner work to meet you in the place you have arrived at, who find your honesty refreshing rather than confronting, who respect your standards because they have their own, who love that you are self-sufficient because they want a companion, not a project, who feel settled rather than threatened by your emotional clarity, who find your peace with solitude not emasculating but deeply admirable, because it means that whatever you offer them, you offer freely. Those men are out there. They are perhaps rarer than we would like, but they exist. And here is the thing, they can only find you if you are being fully yourself. Every time you shrink to make a nervous man comfortable, you also become invisible to the right man. Because the right man is not looking for someone smaller than herself. He is looking for someone who has shown up fully to her own life, and you can only be found if you are actually there. So the nervousness that certain men feel around you, it is not a reason to change. It is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is a signal, a clear, reliable signal, about whether this particular man has the interior life, the emotional depth, and the genuine security to actually be a partner to you, rather than a complication. Let us go a little deeper on each of these 5 qualities, because I think there is more to say about what they look like in real life, how they manifest in the actual texture of a relationship or a first connection, and what specific behaviors they tend to provoke in the men who are made nervous by them, because recognizing these behaviors is how you protect yourself. When it comes to your relationship with truth, the nervousness often shows up in a very particular way. The man who cannot handle your honesty will rarely say outright, "Your honesty makes me uncomfortable." Instead, he will reframe it. He will call you too direct. He will say you have a sharp tongue. He will suggest that you are harsh or cold, or that you think you are better than everyone. He will tell you that a softer woman would have said things differently. He will make you feel as though clear communication is somehow a personality defect. This is worth examining because these statements reveal something important. When someone calls you too direct for calmly stating your perspective, what they are actually saying is that they prefer a version of you that softens truth until it cannot be acted upon. They prefer a version of you that is so concerned with their comfort that your own clarity gets sacrificed in the name of keeping the peace. And that preference, the preference for your silence over their discomfort, is not love. It is a request for you to disappear enough to make them comfortable. Your honesty deserves to be in a space where it is welcomed, where a man says, "I really appreciate that you tell me the truth," because so many people won't. Where your clear communication is received as a gift rather than a threat. That space exists. You deserve to be in it. When it comes to your self-sufficiency, you're not needing to be rescued. The nervous response often shows up as a kind of subtle condescension. The man who is made nervous by your competence will often try to find cracks in it. He will helpfully point out ways things could be better. He will make small, gentle suggestions that are really asking you to need him. And if you continue to show yourself capable and unshaken, some of these men will progress to something more overt. They will criticize your choices. They will question your judgment. They will be dismissive of your accomplishments. Not explosively, but in the small ways that are designed to reduce confidence over time. They will tell you, sometimes very gently, that you might be missing something that he could provide. This is manipulation, even when it wears the costume of helpfulness. Real support from a real partner does not look like this. A real partner celebrates your competence. He feels proud to be with a woman who has built something real. He is not looking for places where you need him. He trusts that you have chosen him because you want him, and that is enough. When it comes to your emotional clarity, the nervous response is often anger, or a close cousin of anger, which is contempt. A man who cannot tolerate your clarity about your own feelings will call you oversensitive when you say something made you uncomfortable. He will tell you that you are reading too much into things. He will say you are too in your head. He will suggest that your emotional intelligence is actually a kind of emotional excess, that the problem is not what he did, but your response to it. This is a classic form of deflection, and it relies entirely on your being uncertain enough about your own emotional experience to accept his reframing. When you hold your ground, when you say calmly and clearly, "I understand you see it differently. Yeah, but this is my experience of what happened," and you do not back down, you watch something interesting happen. The conversation cannot progress on the path he intended. He cannot dismiss you. He cannot rewrite the story. And in that moment of impasse, what he does next tells you everything. A secure man will genuinely hear you, even if he disagrees. He will engage with your experience rather than trying to erase it. An insecure man will become more agitated, more dismissive, or he will simply withdraw, punishing you with silence for the crime of knowing yourself. When it comes to your standards, the nervous behavior often begins as charm. The man who intends to negotiate your standards down will start by showing up so beautifully that those standards seem easy to meet. He is attentive, communicative, consistent, warm. And then, gradually, in small increments, things slip. And when you notice, when you name it, when you say, "I've noticed things have shifted, and I want to talk about that," one of two things happens. A real man hears it and course corrects because he respects both you and himself enough to do so. A fragile man gets defensive. He minimizes. He tells you that you expect too much. He tells you that nobody is perfect. He points to the early days as proof that he is capable of meeting your standards and implies that the fact that he is no longer doing so is somehow your fault. This is the moment of revelation, because standards are not something a healthy man resists. A man of genuine character wants to be a good partner. He wants to show up well. He does not feel suffocated by being asked to be consistent and respectful. He feels called to be his best self. If a man treats your standards like an unreasonable burden, he is not telling you that your standards are too high. He is telling you that he is too low, and that he would prefer it if you would stop noticing. When it comes to your peace with solitude, the behavior this triggers in nervous men is perhaps the most revealing of all, because this quality, more than any other, removes the most powerful tool from an insecure man's toolkit, which is the implicit threat of abandonment. When a man knows that a woman fears being alone, he can always retreat to that fear as a last resort. He can make her feel precarious, uncertain, on the edge of loss, and watch her scramble to close that gap, even if closing that gap means accepting something she should not accept. But when a woman is at peace with being alone, that tool dissolves. And in its absence, some men become almost frantic. They cycle through behaviors that are designed to introduce instability, hot and cold patterns, sudden withdrawals, intense recommitment followed by another withdrawal. They are testing to see if they can find the place where your calm breaks, where your peace cracks and the familiar fear bleeds through. And when it does not, when you respond to their instability with a quiet steadiness that makes clear you are not going to fall apart, the most insecure of them either leave or escalate. If they leave, understand what that departure actually is. It is a man confirming with his exit that he was never there for you. He was there for your need of him. He was there for the power that came from being the solution to your loneliness. And when your loneliness refused to be his leverage, there was nothing left that he actually wanted. His leaving is not a loss. It is a gift, because it clarifies finally and completely what you were actually dealing with. If they escalate, they have decided to manufacture the crisis you refuse to naturally provide. They do something hurtful, sometimes dramatically hurtful, hoping to provoke a fear response that gives them their leverage back. This is where emotional safety becomes critically important. A woman who recognizes this pattern, who can name it for what it is, not a relationship in distress, but a man desperately trying to create a dependency, is in a position to step back from it clearly and make choices that protect her peace. I want to talk for a moment about the grief that can come with recognizing these patterns, because sometimes when a woman understands that the man she has been drawn to or has been in relationship with is actually deeply insecure and threatened by her wholeness, the first emotion is not relief. It is sadness. It is a kind of quiet heartbreak because you wanted him to be something else. You saw something in him, or believed you did. And the recognition that what you saw was either performance or potential that was never going to be realized is a genuine loss that deserves to be acknowledged. You are allowed to grieve that. You are allowed to feel sad that someone you cared about was not who you hoped. You do not have to rush past that sadness into either anger or detachment. The grief is real. The disappointment is real. And feeling it fully, without letting it rewrite your belief in your own worth, is one of the most courageous things a human being can do. What you do not have to do is blame yourself for his limitations. What you do not have to do is conclude that your honesty or your self-sufficiency or your emotional clarity or your standards or your peace with solitude were the cause of the failure. They were not. His inability to meet them was the cause, and his inability to meet them says nothing about whether they were worth having. They were, they are. There is also something I want to name about the women who are watching this and recognizing themselves not in the confident, settled place we have been describing, but in an earlier chapter. The woman who is still a bit afraid of being alone. The woman who still softens her truth a little too much to keep the peace. The woman who still sometimes lets her standards bend because the loneliness feels too sharp. If that is you, this video is still for you, maybe especially for you, because these qualities we have been describing are not something you either have or do not have. They are something you grow into. They are the fruit of a process of self-discovery and self-trust that has a timeline entirely its own. Every woman moves through it in her own time, at her own pace, triggered by her own experiences. There is no judgment here. There is no hierarchy where the fully settled woman is more worthy than the woman still finding her footing. The woman still finding her footing is doing something incredibly brave, and the path forward is made clearer, not harder, by understanding what awaits on the other side of it. The other side of it is this: a life where your honesty is not a problem, but a gift, where your self-sufficiency is not a threat, but a strength, where your emotional clarity is not too much, but exactly enough, where your standards are not walls, but the elegant architecture of a life built on self-respect, and where your peace with your own company is the foundation from which every relationship you choose, romantic or otherwise, is built on solid ground. That is not a fantasy. That is not a sales pitch. That is what becomes available to a woman who has done enough inner work to stop being afraid of herself. And for many women over 60, it is not just available. It is already here. Let us also talk about what happens when the right man arrives. Now, because this conversation has spent a lot of time on the nervous, insecure man, And it is important to spend equal time on the contrast, on what it feels like when you encounter a man who is actually secure, who is not made nervous by your wholeness, who can genuinely meet you where you are. The first thing you notice is that there is no performance, or rather, there is a different kind of performance, the kind that comes from someone genuinely trying to show you their best self because they respect you, not the kind that comes from someone trying to make an impression before he reveals his actual self later. The difference is subtle but distinct, and women who have developed their own emotional clarity can feel it. The second thing you notice is that your honesty does not create friction. When you say what you think or name what you feel, he leans in rather than tightening up. He responds with genuine curiosity or genuine vulnerability, not defensiveness or dismissal. He is interested in knowing what you actually think, not in managing it. The third thing you notice is that your self-sufficiency seems to make him feel something like relief. He does not need you to need him. He does not try to create dependency. He is happy to be helpful when you want help, and equally happy to step back when you do not. He is there because he wants to be, and he can tell, because you have made it clear that you are there because you want to be too. And that mutual, freely chosen presence is deeply comfortable for both of you. The fourth thing you notice is that he has his own standards, and when they encounter yours, they do not clash, they resonate. You are both people who have chosen to live with intention, to require respect, to be honest even when it costs something. That shared architecture makes conversation easy and trust possible in a way that negotiation never could. And the fifth thing you notice is that your peace does not threaten him. He does not need to introduce instability to feel important. He is, in fact, himself a person who has made some peace with solitude, who has a relationship with his own interior life that sustains him, so that he is not looking to you to fill an emptiness he has not addressed in himself. Two people who are each okay on their own, coming together because they genuinely want to. That is the beginning of something real. That is what becomes possible when you stop shrinking. When you stop performing a lesser version of yourself in the hope that it will be more receivable. When you trust that the woman you have actually become, the full, seasoned, clear-eyed, deeply feeling, beautifully complex woman you are, is exactly the woman the right person is looking for. I also want to address something that might be sitting quietly in the back of your mind as you listen to this. Some of you might be thinking, all of this sounds wonderful, but is it actually realistic? Are there genuinely men over 60 who have done this kind of work, who are secure enough to receive a woman like this? Or is this a beautiful story that mostly ends in solitude? This is a fair question, and it deserves a real answer rather than empty reassurance. The honest answer is that men who have genuinely done their inner work are not as common as women who have done theirs. The cultural conditioning of masculinity in the generation that is now over 60 created very particular barriers to self-reflection. Men were told explicitly and implicitly that emotions were weakness, that needing anything was vulnerability, that the measure of a man was external and visible and never, ever interior. Many men lived their entire early and middle adult lives inside that framework, and some of them never questioned it. But some of them did. Some of them had life experiences that cracked that framework open. Loss, health scares, the end of a long marriage, the death of someone close, a period of forced solitude. And in the space that was created by that cracking, they found something unexpected, themselves. And some of those men did the work, quietly without any cultural framework that celebrated them for it, often without any language for what they were doing. They sat with themselves. They got to know their own fear and their own grief and their own need. They arrived, in their own time and their own way, at a version of themselves that is genuine rather than performed. Those men are out there. They are perhaps not walking around advertising what they have become. They are not the loudest ones in the room. They are not the most immediately impressive ones, but they are real, and they are worth waiting for. More importantly, whether or not a particular man arrives, your life as it is right now, with all 5 of these qualities running through it, is genuinely worth living. Your honesty is making your relationships richer. Your self-sufficiency is giving you freedom that a dependent life never could. Your emotional clarity is protecting you and guiding you. Your standards are keeping your life clean of things that would diminish it. And your peace with solitude is the greatest freedom you have ever had. Those are not consolation prizes for a life lived without the right partner. Those are the actual substance of a life well lived. The right partner, should he arrive, would be an addition to that substance, a wonderful, welcome addition, but not the source of it. And that distinction between a life where love is the source and a life where love is an addition is one of the most profound transformations a woman can make. You have made it, or you are making it. Either way, you are on the path that leads somewhere real. Now, I want to turn this around one more time, because there is one final thing I want to leave you with before we close, and that is this. The nervousness that certain men feel around you is ultimately not really about you at all. It is about them. It is about the gap between the person they present to the world and the person they actually are. It is about the fear that a woman who can see clearly will see that gap too. It is about the terror of being known, really known, when the self that would be known is not the self that has been so carefully constructed and maintained. That nervousness at its deepest root is grief. It is the grief of a man who has never let himself be vulnerable enough to be truly seen, who has armored himself so completely that intimacy, real intimacy, has become impossible. Who encounters in you a woman who has done precisely the thing he has never been able to do: take off the armor, face herself, stay with what she found, and build something real from it, and who feels in the presence of that a mixture of longing and terror that he does not have the emotional language to process. This does not mean you owe him patience. It does not mean you are responsible for his healing. It does not mean you should stay in something uncomfortable, because underneath the difficult behavior is someone who is struggling. His struggle is real, but it is his. Your life is yours, and your job is to tend it with the same care and honesty and intentionality that has gotten you here. But I do think it is worth holding that awareness with a kind of compassionate distance, not because it changes what you need to do, but because it might make the experience of those encounters a little less personal. When a man becomes uncomfortable with your wholeness, he is not telling you something about your worth. He is revealing something about his wound, and the two things are entirely separate. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. You are actually quite remarkable. The life you have built, the clarity you have earned, the standards you have developed, the peace you have made with yourself. These things did not happen by accident. They happened because you kept choosing yourself over and over again, even when it was frightening, even when it was lonely, even when the cultural message all around you was that a woman who chose herself too boldly was somehow choosing against love. You did not choose against love. You chose for the kind of love that could actually hold you, the kind that is built on truth rather than illusion, the kind that respects rather than manages, the kind that is large enough to contain the full reality of who you actually are rather than just the parts that are convenient. That kind of love, whether it comes in the form of a man who has done his work and can meet you, or in the form of a rich, full, deeply connected life that you are living entirely on your own terms. That kind of love is what you deserve. and it is entirely within your reach. It always has been. It just took this long to know that you were worthy of it without having to earn it. If this video resonated with you today, if something we talked about named something you have felt but not had words for, or if it confirmed something you already knew but needed to hear clearly, I would love to know which of these 5 qualities feels most true in your own life right now. Leave it in the comments. Tell me which one landed most deeply. This community is one of the most thoughtful I have ever seen, and the conversations in the comments here are genuinely meaningful. Your perspective matters, and other women listening to this need to hear it. And if you found value in this video, please share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone we love is hand them a reflection of themselves that is actually true. This might be that for someone you know. Before we say goodbye, if you have not already subscribed to The Heart Decoded, now is the time. We put out new content every week specifically for women over 60 who are living with intention, choosing themselves, and refusing to let anyone, including the culture, make them feel like their best days are behind them. They are not. In so many ways, they are right here, right now, in this exact season of your life. Subscribe, ring the notification bell, and come back next week. We will see you then. Take good care of yourself. You have earned every single piece of peace that you carry.